The Honourable Member for Portage-Lisgar.
Mr. Speaker, over 100,000 jobs now have been lost in Alberta. Housing values are dropping. People are desperate. Anyone who thinks this is only an Alberta problem is sadly mistaken. And now the Mayor of Montreal has come out opposing Energy East. Where was the Prime Minister? He was in Davos being starstruck by Hollywood actors. Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister won't show leadership, will one Liberal member of Parliament from Alberta, one of the four, stand up for Western Canadian jobs?
The Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, as a proud Western Canadian, I will stand up for jobs in Alberta and New Brunswick and Newfoundland. And Mr. Speaker, if this were a question and answer period, I would ask them how many major pipelines they built in 10 years. The answer, 0. And the reason they didn't build major pipelines is because their process did not have the public confidence of Canadians. We're talking to Canadians now, and what comes after these consultations, Mr. Speaker, will be Canadians' confidence in delivering these resources to market in a sustainable way.
The Member for Portage-Lisgar.
First lesson to a new minister: never ask a question you don't know the answer to. In fact, our government saw 4 major pipelines built across Canada, 2 of them went to the U.S. It amounts to 1.25 million barrels of oil per day flowing safely and responsibly to market. That's what our government did on this side of the House. That's the fact. Mr. Speaker, we want to see more pipelines built. They create jobs and investment. Will the Prime Minister pick up the phone, call his friend, the Mayor of Montreal, tell him to smarten up and start standing up for Canadian jobs?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, one of the major obligations of the Government of Canada is to make sure our resources end up at Tidewater responsibly. And to do that, we have to have processes that have the confidence of Canadians. And if we would have had the confidence of Canadians, these major pipelines might have been built a long time ago, but there is none of that. But after we get through with a consultation process that has substance, includes Indigenous peoples, understands environmental incomes, we will have a better chance than this government had, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, last week the Mayor of Montreal stated that they were opposed to Energy East, and this is bad news for the Canadian economy. We need this project for the Canadian economy and for all the natural resource sectors in the country combined. What did the Prime Minister do faced with the situation in Davos? Between 3 or 4 selfies, he showed contempt for natural resources. That is insulting and not worthy of a Canadian Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister pick up the phone and call his good old friend Denis Coderre, the Mayor of Montreal, and say that Energy East is a good project for all Canadians, all Montrealers and all Quebecers? The Honourable Minister.
I've had the opportunity to consult with Canadians in Winnipeg and in Halifax and in 2 weeks in Vancouver. And around my first trip outside of Ottawa was to Calgary, where I had an excellent conversation with industry leaders who had just come up to the realization that if we're going to determine the best way of getting our resources to market, we'll need governments, environmentalists, Indigenous leaders, and industry. If we're not able to accomplish that, we'll have the record that these people across should not be very boastful about.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, the government seems to be forgetting that the way to proceed with an oil pipeline is the safest way of carrying oil. It's important, and that is part of the equation, Mr. Speaker. Now, what we're also seeing is that in Quebec, it's a very important project for the economy. We're talking about 3,000 jobs and spin-offs of over $1 billion. The Quebec economy, Canada's economy, needs this project. When will the Prime Minister take action? When will he take up his responsibilities and call the Mayor of Montreal?
Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, we're aware of the importance of the resource economy to Canada. We know that 20% of our country's GDP is embedded in the natural resource sector. We are committed to developing this sector in a responsible way because we understand that there are tens of thousands of people who are now suffering because of low commodity prices, and not only in Alberta and Saskatchewan, but in New Brunswick as well. We understand the importance of developing the sector responsibly, Mr. Speaker. We also understand that the consequence of this downturn has real impact on people. We understand that. We recognize it.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have not yet brought in one new program to create even a single job. Well, I know of a shovel-ready, massive stimulus project that will create thousands of new jobs all across this country and won't cost taxpayers a cent. It's Energy East. Now, we know that Liberals have a habit of saying different things in different parts of the country. So will the Regional Minister for Saskatchewan assure this House that he clearly supports the Energy East project, and will he stand today and denounce the Liberal Mayor of Montreal's divisive statements?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I understand that the Premier of Saskatchewan has actually quoted the Prime Minister on this matter.
Exactly, and he supports it.
Because we understand that to develop our resources responsibly, Mr. Speaker.
Colleagues, let's get off to a good start. Let's restrain ourselves. I know we're excited to be back in the House. It's nice to see you all, I must say. But let's restrain ourselves and let each side have their turn and listen carefully. Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians want to find a responsible way to move these resources to international markets. They want to determine the safest, most economically advantageous and environmentally responsible way of moving them. And the only way that these resources will move across the country is if the people of Canada have public confidence in the decisions that got us there. That is our commitment. That's what we intend to do.
Member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, the thousands of people in my province employed in the energy sector want to hear from the Saskatchewan minister. Now, the member for Wascana has a habit of voting against his own constituents. Instead of listening to the people back home in his riding, he voted to keep the wasteful gun registry. He jailed farmers under the wheat board, and he stayed silent while his prime minister killed the Northern Gateway. But it's never too late to kick the habit. Will he stand today, denounce the divisive statements of the Liberal Mayor of Montreal, and stand up for Saskatchewan's energy sector?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
I don't know, Mr. Speaker. I wouldn't mind having the member's voting record. The people who have voted for him over these last 20 years, and there was 27 years. And I'm sure one of the many reasons they vote for him, Mr. Speaker, is because he listens to them. He's responsive to what they have to say. This government will be responsive to what Canadians tell us about moving these resources to market responsibly. That is the way we develop public confidence, and that's exactly what we're doing.
No.